to conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate both the emergency procedures authorized by FOIA and the emergency ordinance. The Young Adults Advisory Council's Subcommittee on Planning, Infrastructure, and Transportation needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record. It's a bit cumbersome, so I ask you in advance for your patience. First, because each member of the subcommittee is participating in this meeting from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum of members is participating and that each member's voice is clear, audible, and at an appropriate volume for all of the other members. Accordingly, I'm going to conduct a roll call and ask each subcommittee member participating in this meeting to state your name and the location from which you are participating. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. Following this roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can hear every other member. So I'll start us off. Casey Judge calling in from Falls Church, Virginia. Denver is not here. Kiana?
Kiana Simpkins calling in from Herndon, Virginia.
Excellent. And Diego is not here. And Sarah Bufano?
Sarah Bufano calling in from Fairfax, Virginia.
All right. I do have a question, Graham. Who should I pass the virtual gavel to while I make the motion? Does it matter?
You can pass it to Kiana or Sarah, either.
All right. Kiana, gavel's coming your way. So at this point, I'll pass my gavel to Kiana so that I may be heard to make the requisite motion. Here it is. I move that each member's voice may be adequately heard by each other member of the subcommittee.
And then Kiana, you would, oh, sorry, if you already know, but you would just ask for a second, and that's all there is.
Does anybody second this?
I second that.
Excellent. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All right. Motion carries. All right. So second, having established that each member's voice may be heard by every other member, we must next establish the nature of the emergency that compels these emergency procedures, the fact that we are meeting electronically, what type of electronic communication is being used, and how we have arranged for the public to access this meeting. Therefore, I move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for the subcommittee to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting, and that as such, FOIA's usual procedures, which require the physical assembly of the subcommittee and the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that the subcommittee may conduct this meeting electronically through a dedicated video and audio conferencing line, and that the public may access this meeting by registering through the meeting link on the Fairfax County public meeting calendar at https://www.fairfaxcounty.gov/calendar/showcalendar.aspx, or by calling 1-844-621-3956 and entering access code 173-011-9193. It is so moved.
Does anyone second this motion?
I second this motion.
All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. And the votes carry. Finally, it is next required that all of the matters addressed on today's agenda must address the emergency itself, are necessary for continuity in Fairfax County government, and or are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations in the discharge of the subcommittee's lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. It is so moved, and that one doesn't need a second for a vote, correct? Okay, great. All right, so with that, I'm going to open the public hearing. I don't believe we've received any written comments in advance or have anybody signed up to speak. Let's see, I don't think there's anybody on the line. So with that, we can go ahead and move on to our agenda. So I think Graham sent out the agenda, perfect, and he's sharing it now. So the first agenda topic is going to be the review of the scoping questions. Since now we have merged our subcommittees, the Affordable Housing Subcommittee and the Planning and Transportation Subcommittee into one. So we're just going to revisit these scoping questions and address the affordable housing pieces of the scoping questions too. We'll get a temperature read on the group and make sure that we're all still wanting to take the group in the same direction now that we have constituted a larger group. So with that, Graham, I don't know if it's my screen. I'm seeing some weird like squares. Is it just my screen? It's like
You're
blocking
seeing
some
weird
of the text.
squares, like gray blocking
Yeah,
squares.
gray
Yeah, I see
boxes.
that too.
Okay.
You see those too? All right.
Yeah.
Let me stop sharing. This
Okay.
happens usually with PDFs, unfortunately, but I've the Word document pulled up. So
Okay. I have
Um,
it open as well, just in case.
okay.
So
Let's see if I can pull up. Let's see here. 1 second. Okay. How about now? Have you seen blocky squares?
no squares on my end.
Okay. If you do end up seeing it, just let me know, and we'll try to figure out something else. It's typically we see that with like heavy images in PDFs, not so much with Word docs. So I'm sure what's going
Yeah.
on here.
That's odd.
Can you zoom
Okay.
in? Oh, perfect. Thank you.
There we go.
Young, but
Great.
unfortunately, I'm not that young, I guess.
Oh,
It's all good. And I think Denver just joined us. So Denver,
oh,
can you?
great.
Or at least she put something in the chat, so she's here.
Okay. All right, Denver. Well, feel free to jump in verbally when you
Oh,
can.
she's an attendee.
Oh,
That's
so can we
why.
make her?
Don't worry, Denver.
We'll upgrade her.
We're coming for you.
Yeah. Oh, she's been upgraded.
Here we go.
Denver, how does it feel to be a panelist?
Ooh, it feels so nice. Hello, everyone. Happy
Hello,
primary
hello.
day. Sorry for my tardiness, but
Well,
I'm
we
here
thank you
now.
for volunteering. We heard you were working the polls today.
Yeah, outside for the party. It was definitely a sticky day to be out there, but it was an experience.
I can imagine. Oh yeah, I guess I can put my sticker on now that I'm going to see other humans. I was telling Graham I didn't know what to do, but I see Sarah has hers on. So welcome, welcome. So we were just getting started on the first topic of our agenda, which was revisiting those scoping questions now that we've merged the affordable housing group into our big happy group on planning, infrastructure, and transportation. So yeah, basically we're gonna just kind of retouch on these topics and look at things from an affordable housing lens, and we'll run through those and like I said, see where the group is wanting to go and make sure we're kind of all on the same page and what type of work and focuses we want this group to have. So let's see. Without any further ado, the first question was, how does urban planning and transportation affect young adults, and why should we focus on these topics? And so to parallel with that, how does affordable housing affect young adults, and why should we focus on this topic? Anyone have thoughts on those two questions?
And while you're thinking about those, what we've done with the other subcommittees is I'll just scribe as we go, kind of in real time. And I'll try to capture kind of not the verbatim of what's said, but just kind of the intent behind it. So if I don't capture something properly, just let me know either now or afterwards. I'll send this around after the meeting so that you can noodle on it a little bit more and make sure that we're all on the same page. So.
Thanks, Graham. That's very much appreciated.
Yeah, if it's okay with everyone, I'll chime in here. So if I remember correctly, because Casey and I did the original version, there are references to affordable housing and housing throughout it already, which is great. I remember we were struggling to keep it kind of separate. But when I think of why we should focus on this topic with affordable housing in mind, I think one of the big things is without affordable housing for young people, you really lose like the diversity and the vibrancy of an area, and also to some degree the livability of an area as well, because if no young people can come in, then you suddenly only have an aging group of residents. I mean, even if they start off at a younger age, they would obviously age together. And so I'm just thinking that creates a big gap in terms of not just the general makeup of the neighborhood and interactions, but I'm thinking like if there's, homeowners associations or, like the community feel and offerings, and also any of the businesses that are based in that community as well. That makes it much harder for them to find some employees. So I think that it would create without affordable housing for young people, there's going to be a very big gap in the vibrancy and the makeup of some of these communities.
Yeah, I think those are all really, really great points, Sarah, and well said. And really, I feel like without affordable housing, there's no way to retain the young cohort that we really need, like you said, for the workforce and to make the community a well-rounded, diverse group of individuals. That's the key stepping stone to attaining wealth. And I know so many people who, when they move up here, either, there's a time of living with parents. I lived with my friend's parents because I didn't have parents living up here, in order to even try and save money, and then putting like 50% of your income towards rent. And then how are you going to pay off your student loans? And then how are you going to ever be able to put a down payment on a house? So I feel like it's this vicious cycle that if we don't have that affordable housing component, there's never a way for young people to kind of crawl out of that cycle of, I don't want to necessarily say poverty, but sometimes poverty, or not being comfortable enough to thrive. So.
And I just think I just want to add as well, like, I just feel like when I think of affordable housing for this area, with housing being so expensive that it is, like, affordable housing doesn't necessarily mean like, a house that's like 10K, which is obviously like I'm exaggerating, right? I don't own, I'm not a real estate agent. But affordable housing, I think could be just a whole range of price points, because there is, a lot of price points that are missing under a pretty high number. So, we're not just talking about, low income housing, we're talking about middle class housing as well. Which kind of goes back to the, the gap, and also what Casey was saying about it just becomes a place with people that either already have wealth or are stuck renting because they're unable to reach that.
Also, I mean, kind of going on the frame of diversity. We have more than high-level jobs in this region. We are feeding several different sectors and support sectors and frontline sectors and workers who are supporting everyone else. And if we can't provide a place for them to live, we're going to lose that talent. And then all the businesses who moved here for that talent will also move as well. So kind of it's a devilish cycle there.
Are there any other thoughts on this first question? All right, well, we can move on to the second one while Graham's finishing up typing. So our original question was, is there a connection between the pattern of the built environment and the quality of life for residents, young adult residents in particular? And if so, what might explain this? And then the follow on from the affordable housing lens is, how does affordable housing impact quality of life, especially for young adult residents?
And just to chime in for a second, because I just think context of why we wrote what we wrote is useful. Casey and I felt like, if I remember correctly, obviously correct me if I'm wrong. Casey and I felt like we really touched on a lot of this in the first one, which is why we put a relatively brief response in here. And honestly, I would argue with the affordable housing, I feel like we've also touched on quite a bit of that, the answer to this one in the first one, with the whole quality of life cycle financial aspect. So yeah, just wanted to provide that context.
We tried to coin our own term, fun amenities. So if you see that red underlined. But yeah, I think that, without obviously affordable housing that's near these really great places and spaces, you know, you want to make sure that people can access these great spaces that we're creating in Fairfax County, and aren't, you know, sprawled out and having to travel long distances via car to come to these public parks or, you know, yeah, like a Mosaic or a Reston Town Center. So making sure that it's all connected together is really important for a vibrant community.
I think that the lack of affordable housing would decrease the quality of life for young adults here because they're struggling to make ends meet, so they can't go out and do all the fun things. And if they do go out and do all the fun things, then they can't afford to live where they're living, and then they have to move, and that's problematic.
Yeah, we shouldn't have to choose, you know. We should be able to have it both, fun places and spaces and a affordable place to live.
Yeah, and I mean, I've got a lot of friends who, you know, not being able to afford in this area have moved, you know, a good hour plus away, which, you know, I mean, that obviously that must have been a tough decision for them, and you know, if they're happy with it, that's great. But I'm just thinking, like, from a commute standpoint, you know, it's not like their job location has changed, and while we could argue that, you know, COVID has put the whole workplace situation is very TBD and constantly shifting. You know, I'm just thinking like longer commutes definitely impacts your quality of life, the time with your loved ones, the time with your kids. And then you can get into the whole idea of childcare. You can also get into the environmental impact, you know, that having a long commute can have. So I'm just thinking of, you know, how it can kind of snowball.
All right. So for the next question, I don't think there was I think the third question was pretty broad, so we can look at it from an affordable housing lens as well of what are the consequences of the status quo, are there equity considerations, and what are the potential effects of recommending certain strategies over others. No, it is interesting looking at just rereading mine and Sarah's kind of thoughts on this. We did bring up the housing crisis in this and equity in terms of when it comes to gentrification, making sure all voices are at the table during the decision-making process. So, you know, I kind of think that that goes very well towards the affordable housing piece of the puzzle as well.
And currently, Fairfax County public school system is facing a segregation by like planning of our school systems, where your zip code and where these affordable housing units and apartments are located are putting certain folks of color and different backgrounds in certain school systems and pyramids, which is, you know, then correlating to other community services and all the great stuff there, which is definitely impacting our children's success rate. And we're talking about even high school students, right? There's a whole thing we're at South Lakes. They're thinking about redistricting South Lakes because currently it just doesn't make sense and it's overpopulated. And there's a school that's underpopulated that would make sense to shift the numbers around. But people are pushing back because they don't want those kids in their school system. They don't want those kids to interact with our kids. So we invest in integrated and properly established affordable housing where it's well, integrated probably isn't the best word. And what is the planning word where they're all put together? You all should know.
Inclusionary.
Yeah, okay, that works. Where we're, yeah, I mean, like what we're seeing with new developments, we're like, okay, you're gonna build a high rise and 20% of that has to be affordable housing on top of the, you know, studio bedroom that you're gonna charge $2,500 for, right? And making it more a community open to all incomes like Reston, like, you know, taking the Reston design and pushing that forward. But yeah, when I think affordable housing, I definitely think forced segregation in our school systems and how that's going to be detrimental to the further divide that we have in Fairfax County when it comes to North County versus South County versus everything else.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you could even broaden that like beyond the school system. Like, you know, like there are some pockets of Fairfax County that I just feel like are known for being, you know, lower income and some that are very well known for being higher income. And I would assume, you know, I don't, you know, I'm not an expert on this, but I would assume that probably the pockets of where affordable housing, you know, have been put up thus far has contributed to that.
One thing I'd add to that, if you're interested in kind of the geography of affordability, one thing that Judith Cabelli, who kind of gave a presentation from HCD a couple of meetings ago, provided in the chat towards the end that I can send around to everybody that's interested, is this new dashboard that they have for looking specifically and helping people understand from a map standpoint where affordable housing is located in the county. So you can kind of look at it by district, you can look at it across the entire county. You can look at it by different types of affordable housing. So some of it is market affordable, as we call it in the industry, so to speak. So it's unrestricted, uncommitted. It's just kind of affordable by its nature, either its location, its condition, whatever variety of reasons. And then some of it is kind of, as Denver is getting at, the kind of the inclusionary zoning, affordable dwelling units. And then some of it's just what we used to call kind of public housing, or housing that is financed in some way, shape, or form in a large way by public financing. So it's a really interesting tool, this dashboard, because it really does kind of give you that geographical understanding, Sarah, that you're talking about, of, you know, where are the pockets of affordability, and where is it less prominent. It surprises me when I look at this stuff, because it does kind of take your assumptions and play around with them quite a bit.
Any other comments on this question? All right, we can scroll on down to the next one, question number 4. So our affordable housing question is, what are challenges and opportunities associated with the supply and demand for affordable housing? How does this impact the retention and attraction of young adults in the county? I do think one of the challenges, and it's kind of an age-old question, is, you know, the developers say, well, who's going to pay for it? You know, and it's like, well, you are if you want to go higher and larger than what you're allowed to do by right. You know, but I do think that we as a county to have a, you know, we owe it to the county to provide and to fund affordable housing. But I know that's a huge challenge in making sure that there's enough. Right now, the demand seems to way exceed the supply. So yeah, I've just always heard of the funding component of affordable housing being a huge barrier.
I guess another challenge would be kind of what you guys touched on earlier, was that maybe some people wouldn't want that around in their area.
Yeah. I was gonna say that NIMBYs, yes. And Grant just typed it on all caps. That's perfect. Yeah. I'm sure, you know, that goes to kind of what Denver was saying too, with like the school redistricting. Like, you don't see as many, you'll see all the yellow t-shirts with the same, you know, like save our kids. That gets people out there. Yeah.
Yeah, we see this a lot in our line of work with in the planning and zoning realm. And I will say that I think that there is kind of a general. I think the one thing that we encounter a lot, not always, but the general philosophy for a lot of people is we like the idea of affordable housing. We like these ideas in theory that, you should be able to set aside certain units for people that don't make, 100% of the area median income, for example. They like the idea in theory, and they don't mind it going somewhere else. And they really specifically don't think that it's appropriate, next to their neighborhood or in their neighborhood or on the edge of their neighborhood. Because they'll come back with reasons. A lot of them that might make sense, in kind of isolation. And it kind of comes down to what is as the county do we find to be kind of the top priority, because there's always going to be an environmental argument for not developing, there's always going to be a transportation argument for not developing affordable housing. There's always going to be a reason, but which one weighs out, which one rises to the top as the priority. So, but I'll say this, Kiana, it's probably the biggest challenge. Got to hit it on the head.
Well, I mean, when we're talking about affordable house, I mean, we were talking about transportation infrastructure, all of this. When we think about affordable housing, we also think about, folks who might not have cars, who want these transportation measures, and that seems to be even a harder task than getting affordable units in a development that's already being planned. It's like having an extra bus line. And like, how do we ensure those two go hand in hand, and when one's planned, the other one is planned for it?
All right, we'll go on down to question number 5. So, how could the affordable housing needs of young adults be better met, and how should this happen? And again, I see missing middle housing was a part of our previous discussion, so same general thought process. And then Denver, that kind of hits a little bit on your last point too at the end, building up and increasing density around metro stops and transit station areas. Also locating mixing in affordable housing at those transit station areas and those areas that are already accessible to transit. I think that's really important especially for young people, but for all of Fairfax.
Yeah, I think that goes back to like the inclusionary housing part as well.
Mm-hmm. And just to kind of expand on the missing middle housing too, I think something, could be done from a planning, this is planning and zoning, but it's affordable housing too. Like from a planning and zoning perspective, because right now we're just seeing all of these really modest, like 1950s homes being completely demolished and then McMansions built in their place. And that could have been an affordable house option for younger people, but now it's completely priced out. So trying to find a way to incentivize developers to keep those affordable missing middle housing options instead of buying them out and bulldozing the site.
Yeah, the geography of this, being a planner and a nerd, it's really interesting seeing which parts of the county kind of came first. The kind of the inner ring suburbs, Mason District in particular is the one I'm thinking of.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing these 1950s, Cape Cods and Ramblers and everything like that. Which ones are doing really well in terms of like kind of preserved, intact neighborhoods that are more or less kind of the same that they've been, in terms of the building quality for 60 years at this point, and then which ones are really in rough shape and are being one by one flipped over into, kind of the biggest the biggest thing you can put on the lot, from a zoning standpoint. It's not just a Fairfax thing either.
Mm-hmm.
Old job in Palo Alto, it was like that, but on steroids. It was intense. So just the level of replacement of older homes. But it is a huge problem.
Mm-hmm. And I have lots of friends.
What the incentives? What incentives can you offer?
Right. Yeah, I have lots of friends who are kind of getting outbid by developers too. You come in with a certain down payment, and how can you compete with an all cash offer? And they're just going to flip it, and then it's going to be $2.5 million. So it's like all of this is such a huge problem for young adults to live in this area.
And I mean, what can the county do? I mean, there's nothing the county can do to be like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
sellers, we want you to
Right.
have pity on folks. So I like buying my place. It was a flippable property, and like I had to like write a letter, and like they wanted someone of character. And I was like, thank goodness, right? Because otherwise, I would have gone bought out by a developer who would have made a shit ton on my place. So yeah.
Yeah, we did a flyer with pictures that included our cats
Yes.
and all of that kind of thing. Yeah. No, and I know, and I it's like, is there just brainstorming out loud? Like, are there different there's things that other communities do that are called like the looming studies, where basically you limit height or you limit total lot coverage. Basically, um, you're further restricting how McMansion-y things can get, and that limits the developers from coming in and maximizing and then just trying to sell for that maximum square footage. So it maybe not as it maybe isn't a county thing. Maybe it's something that some policies could help, but definitely a problem.
I will say it might. I will say in Palo Alto, we had extremely strict zoning standards with regards to, we call them daylight planes, which is basically kind of bulk standards for homes. We had specific tight restrictions on a sliding scale for FAR for homes, which is not something that we have, hyper strict requirements for that sort of thing. And then also very strict height limits. So, and we still got the and it, I don't know. It might in certain markets. I'm not sure, but it didn't there.
Yeah, right.
Maybe what we had from a zoning standpoint was in reaction to it originally to try to slow it down a little bit. So it may have produced some some mitigation there, but that in and of itself, without kind of an incentive to it,
right.
I don't know. It's tough. I'm all for it. Don't get me wrong.
Anything.
Yeah.
Are there any other thoughts on this question before our last question? All right. So this is the same question for affordable housing: is what information such as data, presentations, best practices do we need on affordable housing for young adults to explore the topic in order to define the problems further and establish goals? Who should we hear from? Data sources? What other jurisdictions should we reach out to? And what could we learn from them? So just a lot of many questions on affordable housing.
One thought. I mean, we can add what we've done thus far with the council, which is we had Judith Cabelli, who's the director of affordable housing development for the county, who's able to come in and speak to us. One thing that is an ongoing effort is looking at affordable housing preservation. So this is looking at what we call market affordable rental properties. That's going through a policy plan amendment right now that she and I are working on in particular. So that's one thing that's looking specifically at strategies for incentivizing the preservation of affordability that's associated with those types of rental units. We don't have a specific task force any longer that's looking at this. So not kind of like a public facing entity that we had a task force and they've produced the recommendations that are being filtered into this plan amendment. But there is going to be additional outreach to that plan amendment. We'd be happy to come back and kind of brief the council on that effort because it's a big one. And it's one that has the ability to, if we get the toggles right, the ability to potentially preserve not just structures, but also affordability in projects that are undergoing redevelopment. So that's a big one that we can come back to the council once we're kind of in a phase where we've been able to write a draft policy, for example. Another one that comes to mind is this is a bit off topic from what we've talked about thus far, but there is going to be a new task force, a community task force of stakeholders that's going to be looking at manufactured housing, mobile homes in the county. And so that's going to be a really big effort that's going to be spearheaded by Health and Human Services starting this summer. And so that'll be a very interesting one because it's a very small but significant stock of affordable housing in the county. It's unusual, in the sense that it's rental housing that in a lot of cases where people actually own the trailer that they're living in. So they own the asset, but then they rent the pad on which it sits. So it's kind of it's unique and unique challenges that are associated with it. So that's one where they're in the formation of kicking off this task force, and it should be coming up pretty soon. But that might be one to also track and follow and see if there might be somebody that'd be interested from the Young Adult Advisory Council in attending some of those, or potentially having a representative come and speak about manufactured housing, because it's a big one that doesn't get a lot of attention, frankly, because it is small, but it is predominantly affordable.
Yeah, and there's a big one in Chantilly. It goes for miles. It's beautiful development. Yeah, how do we preserve that land? Great question.
So one of the, I guess, and maybe this is jumping ahead to the next agenda topic, but with the strategic plan, there's a ton of initiatives on housing. So I guess I'd be interested in the follow on, like the next steps once the board does adopt whatever they adopt in the fall, and getting our group involved in those initiatives and strategies once they start coming up with actual, okay, to address this, we're going to do X. So I'm not sure, Graham, if you have ideas on how best to keep us like engaged and in the loop and being able to provide our perspective as those real policies are being implemented.
It's a great question. I think that the way that we've thought about it thus far has been that we have the draft strategies right now, and that those are still in draft form.
Right.
That this would be a good time from a policy standpoint and thinking through what it is that the county has in terms of priorities, that we would be able to kind of weigh in on those while they're being formalized and finalized. You're talking about kind of the next step, which is the implementation of the strategies, the development of programs and assignment of funding for these sorts of things. That's a great question, and I'm not sure how we can. It's not that we can't, because I think that'll be a big conversation. But I know that the ability to come back to the strategic plan office and kind of see what's going to happen from an implementation standpoint is just as critical, if not as critical as getting the exact strategy right in terms of the verbiage. So
sure.
I can follow up with Amy. Yeah.
Step one can be the draft, our weighing in on the draft strategies, but then I guess just thinking long term in terms of our scoping and our goals for the subcommittee and our group as a whole. Maybe we can, like you said, that's a good idea to follow up and say, hey, we want to, we don't want to just be like, all right, check the box. Now we'll go do these things and prioritize them in different ways. So okay.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I'm sure that many other stakeholders are similar to ours that come from different perspectives have the same question. Like what is the implementation of this phase 2 going to look like, and how's it going to take place? I imagine, given kind of the level of outreach that they've had, with a strategic plan that would continue. But I don't know the details on it. I think that it's a great question that we should ask Amy and see what she thinks.
And I just want to chime in and say, yes, I wanted to be able to have this group provide some advice on the strategies while they're still in draft form. Especially, there might be, I'm conscious that there was a whole task force that created the recommendations, and, I'm really happy to hear that that was the case. I'm sure it would be great just to provide a little bit of a young adult, overlay or lens on those recommendations to see, and advise the supervisors as to which impact young adults the most. So certainly, I'm sure that we, or it's very likely given their expertise that we support all of the recommendations, but I'm sure that there are some that in particular, are really relevant for this group.
Absolutely. Casey, how would you like to, so we have a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Slightly over how we had it in the agenda, but would you want to start looking at some of the chapters at this meeting?
Yeah, so I guess I would defer to the group. So what we were thinking about for the next part of the meeting, which we figured would probably go over into the next month's meeting as well, was starting to look at the strategic plan, the different strategies, specifically the ones that are for housing and neighborhood livability, and then mobility and transportation. So I guess I would like to know from you all if you want to spend time looking at those today. I'd put together a PowerPoint on like just some slides on what each of them are, because there's a lot and there's a lot to read through. So I don't know if you'd rather me just send that to you all and then we basically do a little bit of homework and then come prepared to discuss it in our next July meeting. We could also ask for somebody representing those two strategies to be at our meeting, and maybe they could give us a little bit of a brief overview, and then we can look at which ones we want to come out with and say, hey, like we really support X, Y, and Z, or we want you to prioritize this in your next implementation phase or when you go to the board. What are your general thoughts on our approach?
I will chime in first, I guess.
Go for it.
I'm never sure if it's like, a delay in the computer or anyway. Yeah, so I have reviewed the strategic plan, but the last time I reviewed it was before we met as a body last year. So while I've got some notes in some areas that I think are really relevant to the group, I think it would be really useful if that PowerPoint that you created could be shared, and if we could be very specific as to where to focus our attention, so that way all of us can be, prepared for the next meeting on exactly what to talk about. I'm conscious, like to your point, it is a lot. I know that I think there were 5 in particular that were shared in the email. So I'm sure it would be maybe instead maybe we use like the next few minutes to come up with like some questions or goals that we want to accomplish in the next meeting instead, and that way when we're prepping for it, we've got something in mind.
That sounds great. All right. Sorry, I'm going to be taking
What I shared, just so you know, Sarah, what I shared were the 5 chapters that were the most relevant. And then within each of those, you look just at housing and neighborhood livability, there's 23 strategies within that one chapter. So there's a lot. There's a lot we could look at. So
yeah.
Exactly.
the idea
So
of kind of setting a goal as and figuring out which ones we want to tackle first is a really good idea.
Yeah, so I've broken down basically into the overarching categories and then the individual strategies for each of them and just kind of laid them out. So I was thinking I could send that to everybody, and then in terms of like what our goals are for the next month, maybe what do you guys think about coming up with our I don't want to say a top 5 list, but maybe like something that's more bite-sized, so when we go to make a recommendation to the board or whoever we're doing, we can say, yes, we agree with all of them. These are our, top 5 that we really strongly support. And if there's any that we don't support, we want to make sure that this is what we recommend changing, or this is something that we don't endorse as the young adult advisory subcommittee or committee, whoever's writing the letter. Thoughts on that approach?
I definitely like getting like the top 5 and definitely doing that
Mhm.
with us identifying the top priorities. Granted, they
Mhm.
need to implement this strategy and have a plan. So how can we
Right.
directly insert ourselves? And I guess that's the
Mhm.
next question of like, how can we
Mhm.
make sure they're actually holding themselves accountable? Right?
Right.
And putting forth this strategy in the way that we hope they would, and then influence and I think that's like step 4. But
Sure.
having that thought of like how we can influence it past um just saying like these are important.
And
Right.
just to add on to that, because I completely agree, Denver. I think part of that as well is like influencing what that looks like. Like I'm thinking, like one of the mobility and transportation strategies that I've pulled out is, promote dense transit-oriented mixed-use development, which is exactly what we've been talking about. But what does promote mean? Like, are they going to create 5 over the next 20 years? Are they just gonna, advertise that they prefer developers to do that, but it's up to the developer? So I wonder, if we can, of those 5 that we pick, I know that's hard to pick 5, but I think if we can do that, it'll really help focus us on, influencing what that looks like and inserting ourselves into, the thought leadership of fleshing it out a bit more, which I think would be really, really valuable.
Okay, so that sounds good. So I'm thinking then we can devote pretty much all of next month's meeting to going over this and coming up with kind of a collective approach. Because I know I want to be respectful of everyone's time. An hour is, it looks like that's a good amount of time for each of us with our schedules. Let me know if you think it should be more. I would say less. We probably would never be able to get anything done, but so we'll devote the whole agenda then to kind of going through these strategies and coming up with a game plan and examples of how to implement the strategies. So Sarah, everyone should come with sorry, it just disappeared. With your top 15 to 20, and then we can work through each of the top 15 to 20 strategies. Are you talking about the whole plan, or are you talking about just the 2 subcategories of housing and transportation?
I was just thinking, like, how can we make sure that we use the hour, because it
Mhm.
isn't like it's a lot of time, but it's also not a lot of time. So,
Right.
if we were to review the 5 chapters that Graham has sent, with the scope of this committee in mind, maybe we all pick our own top 20, 15 to 20 or something, and that way we can because as Graham said, like in that one chapter there's 23 strategies. So are we going to have time to go through all 100+ strategies within the
Oh,
hour?
no.
Yeah,
Definitely
exactly.
not. Yeah, no, definitely not. I was thinking
Exactly.
people come with maybe 5, but if we want to go up to 15 to 20, that's fine too. Uh, or maybe 5 per overarching chapter. That would get closer to your number because there's 20 some, 30 some in each. So okay, all right, that
Yeah,
works.
and
So
then we could like as a group figure out what the committee or subcommittee's top 5 are or something like
okay,
that. I think that
that
would
sounds
be
good.
yeah. Cool.
Great.
One, I don't mean to overcomplicate it. So if this is a bad idea, just say stop. One idea would be if you wanted to go with that kind of 15-ish number or so, you could find 5 that you think are perfect as written, or with very minor adjustments would be great for emphasizing from a young adult perspective. 5 that need tweaking, and then 5 that you don't support. And then that would help to kind of frame it as like this is our priority areas as as the young adult voice, so that it's not all just rubber stamping what's there today, but it is kind of this active voice of this is our priority, here's our mission, and then these are the things that we have to say about strategic plan. Don't mean to overcomplicate it if you don't want to take it or leave it. It's just a thought. So.
Just to clarify, the reason why I put 15 to 20 in the chat is because I was thinking if everyone came with their own 15 to 20, then we could look for the 5 that everyone had on their list. So I just want to clarify I wasn't trying to like expand the numbers. Yeah, I think maybe it was a bit confusing. So sorry from
No,
my
no
end.
worries. No worries.
Graham, If we collaborate on a Google Doc, does that violate our FOIA requirement of us not having meetings? Because we're not talking to one another. We're just filling out a Google Doc that we happen to all see. Is this a workaround? I'm just trying to make it easier so we don't spend like, you know, the first 30 minutes like, oh, what about recommendation H212 or whatever, you know, the letters are. Yeah.
I think it depends on probably how it's structured. If you are interacting with another member of the task force or of the council, excuse me, at one time, that's okay. If you're all in the document at the same time, that's not okay. Where you might be chatting with one another. I'm dead serious. You know, if it's 3+, then you start to get into a problem where there's communication back and forth. But no, I think that as long as the document can be, you know, available to the public and everything like that, I think we'll be in good shape.
Yeah, so Graham, if you want to
I'll
look
be the
into...
one to, I'll be the one
Okay.
to run it and everything like that. And so, yeah.
Okay, so either you can look into if there's some Google Doc or like each of us gets an allotted time where we can drop ours in, or Sarah, I think just put in the chat, you know, we could send them to you, Graham. Whatever is legally best, let us know, and then we can come up with a deadline, or you can tell us we need it by this date so we can prepare for the
You
July
could just,
meeting.
I think Sarah's idea is probably the best one, where I'll just
Okay.
develop a form,
Okay.
and then just ask you guys to just send me your top ones, and I can send it. It's not that we can't circulate things. It's just
Okay.
ultimately, it's all about me. It needs to ultimately come to me. So,
So our next
for you know, for public meetings, big and small. So.
So our next meeting is scheduled for July 13th. So do we want to set a date? I know that week before is the Independence Day week. So I don't know. Do we just want to do a couple of days before then? Do we want to do like the Wednesday prior, have our stuff to Graham so Graham can circulate it, or even the Tuesday prior, whatever works best for you guys with your schedules?
Yeah,
How
I'm
about-
good with either.
How about we say Wednesday so we can all have a day after the 4th of July. I think we have the Monday off, or yeah, the Monday off. So we can have Tuesday to get our brains back working, and then Wednesday we'll have them sent to Graham. So.
And just to
Okay.
confirm, we're doing our top 5 from each of the 5 strategies. Is that correct? That Graham sent? Is that what we agreed on?
I'm good with that. I'm also good with Graham's approach of like overall 5 that we like, 5 we change, and 5 we don't support. If there's something that we want to focus like some action items for the board on, but I'm open to either approach.
I mean, I think the only thing that I feel strongly about is that I want to make sure that as a subcommittee we're really focused. And you know, I think the fewer that we as a group, like even if we each come with 15, you know, 5 that like as per, you know, Graham's suggestion, I want to make sure that whatever we like decide on as a group, you know, that we've got, you know, 5, maybe 10 max, but I still
Yeah.
think 5 is probably the best number. So I'm happy with either. I just feel strongly that the outcome from the next meeting is 5.
Yes, I completely agree. Kiana, you have any thoughts on approach? 15 ones we like, some we maybe think need change, some we don't like.
I think
I like Graham's idea.
sorry,
I think
go
it
ahead.
narrows it down for me. Sorry.
Oh. Go ahead, Kiana. I'm gonna stop talking. All right.
I was just saying I really like Graham's idea of the 5 we like, 5 we would change, and then 5 we don't like. Because I think it gives me somewhere to go when I'm looking at things. And then when we come back, we would just settle on 5 that we really want to focus on in our meeting at the end.
And I was gonna say I don't know about like 5 like red alarms, but I think there'll be some that pop up that I'm just like, you're like, oh my gosh, we shouldn't do this, and just marking those as we go on. I don't know if we want to put a number value, but yeah.
Sure. So how about like 5 to 10-ish of everybody's in some different categories, and then we'll find some common ground on around 5-ish that we provide as recommendation forms. Does that work? Okay, excellent. All right, so we've got our marching orders. I know it is 8:02. Are there any announcements? Sarah, you had emailed me. Did you want to talk about the Fairfax County connector bus update you got?
Yeah, I'm really quick. In my supervisor's newsletter last week, there was an announcement that the Fairfax bus is going to take on, I want to say it's a Metro bus route or something that isn't being run right now, but that basically the Fairfax bus was going to add a new route to its list to make sure that people had better access to transportation. And I just suggested to Casey that maybe we write like a short letter saying like, we're like, thank you. Yes, like, this is what we need. We need more transportation. Thank you for stepping up to the plate.
Thoughts on, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. It's which route is it? Just out of curiosity, is it coming out of one of the metro stations?
I would need to double check the email. Sorry.
Just curious. Okay.
My sticker is attached to my hair now, so things are going well. Yeah, I'm I'm happy to write a quick letter if you guys want, and I can have Graham send it around for any edits, and it can just be from our subcommittee chair. Does that work for everybody? All right, cool. Unless Sarah, unless you wanted to write it too, if you want to write it as a member of our subcommittee, either one. I don't want to take the thunder because you're the one that found that great item that needs some kudos. So if you want to write it.
I'm happy with that. Thank you. I appreciate the offer.
So wait, let me clarify. She's good to write it. You're good to write it? Or did you say?
Oh, no, I said I'm good with what you proposed.
Okay. All right. I was like, wait, let me just double check. Okay, excellent. All righty. I'm adding that to my list. Are there any other agenda announcements? Anybody had anything they wanted to share? No, Graham?
Unless there's any others. I know I scared everybody by talking about in-person meetings at the last council meeting. Our current understanding is that July, we are still going to be covered by the current emergency declaration. So at least for July, we can still continue to meet via WebEx. So just want to let you know that that's a possibility as we're setting up dates for the next one.
Thank you. That is good to know. And then I figured maybe next month we could talk about if there's a desire for a little like August subcommittee recess. I know the board and a lot of the backs go on a little break so we can put that on our agenda if there's a desire to take a little Tuesday off in August so everyone can go on vacations and be free. We were talking about how much we need sabbaticals after this last year of everyone working like crazy. So we can add that as a discussion item for next month, see if we want to do that. So any other thoughts? Okay. All right, great. Well, with that, I think we are good to go. Do I have to say anything? Do I ask for a motion to adjourn, or we can just, all right, we are adjourning. I hope everybody has a great Tuesday.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
See ya.
Thank you.
Bye.